Hello and welcome, everyone. I am so sorry for the delay we had in today's presentation. We had a little bit of a technical glitch with our webinar platform, but I believe that we should have it. It should be up and running now. So for everyone on the line, thanks so much for hanging in there with us. I promise we'll make it up to you with a great presentation. For today's 2016 Sales Tax Changes Part 2, a state-by-state update, we've got Shane Radigan, who's back at it, and this time, unlike the first presentation, he's going to go ahead and give a state-by-state update of what's going on for the new year. But before I pass over the mic to him, I just don't want to steal any thunder, I just want to go over a couple quick things. As many of you already know, because I've been receiving lots and lots of questions already, if you do have a question for the presenter or for me, just go ahead and type it into the question box, and we'll try and get to it as soon as we can. We did leave extra time today for questions, so Shane can go ahead and address those. Also, under Event Resources, that is where you will find some of the important documents that we will reference. One of them is a copy of the slides that you do see up on the screen. We also have an actual report, which is an overview of what will be discussed today and even more, going state by state, some of the key initiatives. And we also have an additional document, which is about a nexus survey. So if you're trying to figure out what your sales tax obligations are in multiple states, this sort of a little, I wouldn't call it a cheat sheet, but rather close, will help you out. I don't believe that the listen by phone option is actually going to work today. That was part of our technical glitch. So unfortunately, the presentation will be done through your computer speakers. But if you miss any of today's presentation, no worries. You will definitely have a link to the presentation, the recorded presentation, by tomorrow. So thank you again for everyone for hanging in there, and I'm going to go ahead and pass the mic over to Shane. Take it away.
Thanks, Morgan. An inauspicious start, and I'll apologize ahead of time too for the nasal sneeze. I'm feeling pretty down myself. Got my annual heavy duty cold, so bear with me. We're all hurting a little bit, I guess, this morning. So listen, let's dig in. And like Morgan said, we save time for questions. This is not a CPE course. This is just for information. So we won't suck up all of our question time with our technical delay time, okay? If you have questions, send them in, and we'll save some time towards the end. And let me tell you, when it comes to these update presentations, start of the year is a natural time to think about this stuff. I mean, honestly, a lot of state fiscal years are not calendar years. So while January 1st, definitely on the federal side and a lot of times on the income tax side is a time of great change. Not necessarily on the sales tax side. I mean, it's certainly a marker in time. It's probably the second most busiest change date to July 1st, which actually is the beginning of most states' fiscal years for alterations and changes. But what I really want to get across to you guys, and those of you who have participated in these, I hope you're a return listener. I hope you get some good info out of these things. I'm not just going to do a litany of this and that and this and that. Mostly because Morgan's provided a really cool attachment in the resources, which is more granular as far as state-by-state changes. And they're all important, don't get me wrong, but since I only have your ear for an hour or maybe a little less than an hour today, try to look at some of the broader things that are going on in the context of some changes in the states, okay? And without further ado, let's get going. I was going to talk, and I will talk a little bit. We did, a couple weeks ago, we did a presentation, kind of a mate to this one, which talked about potential federal action, Marketplace Fairness Act, that sort of thing. I'm not going to spend as much time on that. In fact, we're going to suck up those 10 minutes you guys wasted listening to that music and kind of skip over this stuff. Suffice to say, there is potential in the U.S. Congress, guys, still for some sort of legislation that would allow remote states to obligate businesses from outside their state to collect their taxes, even in the absence of the types of nexus triggers that we've come to be aware of in the sales tax realm. That relates to that third attachment that Morgan mentioned. That's it's a kind of a legalistic explanation of nexus, but it's also got a decent beginning little questionnaire in that attachment. Types of things you want to ask your clients if you're a tax pro, or ask your business departments, or ask yourself if you're a little guy, or gal. Hey, look, what kind of contacts do I have? Those are the things we're talking about when I say traditional nexus. Hey, if Congress does something like we think they might, those sorts of nexus triggering activities will probably become a lot less critical to many of us. It'll be more formulaic, as in how much sales are we making across state lines, and are we charging tax on those sales? And if we are reaching a certain threshold, we are going to be collecting everywhere. That'll be the nutshell of the nut of these federal propositions. And I apologize for skipping through them. I hope many of you got a chance to see that preso from a few weeks back. If you didn't, Morgan has it archived, so you can find it on Avalara.com. These are some versions of congressional potential action that's going on. Okay, so this is what you guys came for. One thing that's really important, and we're back to talking about Nexus. We're always seem to be talking about Nexus, but this is where the action is right now, right, guys? Click-through Nexus is something that the state of New York adopted 5 years ago. They have been successful in the state courts. Click-through Nexus has been adopted by many states, including just as of December 1st, November 1st, December 1st, January 1st, Nevada, Washington, Michigan have all adopted it. Vermont we'll look at Vermont's regulations. They're kind of waiting in the wings to see how many other states adopt this kind of Nexus rules. In a nutshell, if you're an e-com provider, you don't have to be an e-com provider, actually. If you're setting up an advertisement on a website, guys, let me explain what click-through Nexus is. This is important, because no matter what happens with Congress, no matter what happens in the Supreme Court, this is the world we're living in now. If your company or your clients are placing ads on websites with a referral package connected to it, in other words, when someone clicks on that ad, makes a purchase, there's a referral fee that changes hands, right? The webmaster, the web host gets a spiff, or gets a $5 bill, or gets some sort of remuneration for a sale made via that advertisement. The states have adopted this legal theory that is a physical presence, meaning if I'm out here in Washington and I sell widgets and I advertise my widgets on a website that's served in New York, and I set up a referral arrangement to go with that advertisement. In other words, every time somebody clicks on that advertisement and buys one of my widgets, I send my buddy web host in New York a $5 check. That arrangement triggers Nexus. What does that mean, Shane? Stop talking like a lawyer. What it means is I got to start collecting tax on all my sales to New York, even though I don't have any other connection with the state of New York. That's what click-through Nexus is. And we're up to a dozen or maybe 13 or 14 states that have adopted this. Be aware of it if you're doing that kind of advertising specifically. Generally, this is the takeaway. Hey, guys, the states are getting real crafty, right? There's no question about it. The states are eager to get as many vendors kind of trapped in their sales tax net, if you will. And they certainly don't mind going after vendors from out of state if they have the regulations and the rules to back them up. This is one way that they're doing it. You'll notice what we put on, or I put on that slide that I thought was really interesting, because for those of you who have dealt in this area at all, the arrangement I just described to you, the website advertisement, click it, I send you $5 for every widget I sell, really was created by a little company out here on the West Coast called Amazon. It's affiliate advertising. And it's really ingenious, and Amazon was a progenitor of it. A lot of people do it now. And so the states really were probably not looking at my little e-com company here in Edmonds, and I'm running out of my garage. They really were probably looking at companies like Amazon, who initiated this method of advertising, where Amazon will, and to this day, will run an ad on your website, no matter how big or small it is. If they think they can get eyeballs on it, they'll run it on there. And what they do is, depending on the arrangement, Amazon a lot of times will give the web host a percentage deal off on their Amazon purchases. That's enough. That's that referral arrangement, thereby indicating nexus. Amazon has, been at the front of all this battle back and forth, but it's interesting to note that they're really respecting these click-through nexus laws. So you can see in their current agreement, or at least as of June or July of 2015, when I pulled this excerpt out, Amazon's really concerned about people operating in these states that have passed click-through nexus laws, but where Amazon does not currently collect. If you're running a little website in one of these states and you've got Amazon advertisements on your website, Amazon runs the risk of getting wrapped up with one of these click-through nexus laws. So you can see that Amazon states specifically in their agreement that, first of all, you won't get an affiliate advertising agreement out of them if you're a resident of one of these states. But if you become a resident of one of these states after you've made an affiliate agreement with Amazon, that agreement is terminated as of the moment you become a resident. The point is not to break down Amazon's affiliate advertising contracts here, guys. This is to show you that Amazon's taking it seriously. Everybody should take it seriously. Even if your customers, your clients, or your company is or is not participating in this sort of thing, this is the sort of thing that, you as tax pros, unfortunately, a lot of times are the last people to find out about. But when you are, every once in a while, when you get the ear of, VP of sales or the founder or some aggressive marketing type, you might not hurt to find out whether or not your company's participating in this sort of thing. Because if you are, and there is a referral agreement behind the advertisement, you very well could be creating obligations in states where, under any normal nexus analysis, at least traditional nexus analysis, you have no obligation to collect. And you might be opening up a risk there. So anyhow, it's important. It's a big change. It's happening quickly. It's spreading fast. So the states are really working hard to get themselves positioned to get as many businesses in that collection net as possible. Click-through nexus is a good way to do it. Here's the Washington one. You can see referral amounts. If there's compensation for referrals, that amounts to a substantial presence, right? And in Washington and in many states, they do have a small seller exemption. In Washington, it's $10,000, so it's really small. What that means is if you're making sales in Washington through an affiliate arrangement like this, if your annual sales in Washington are under $10,000, Olympia is not interested in you. But frankly, if you're making sales less than $10,000 a year in Washington, Olympia is probably never really interested in you. So it's not really much of an exemption. That's how it works, though, guys. And this happens, the states will see something work well in one state, like New York in this case. They've got the money, they've got the horsepower in Albany to pay attorneys and to litigate this stuff and to sort it all out. And New York did exactly that. It's made it all the way to the highest court in New York, and the courts have all blessed it. The U.S. Supreme Court said, we're not going to look at it. So it's good law in New York. And like wildfire, the other states will literally cut and paste those rules into their own regulations and roll the dice. And that's what's happening with click-through nexus. So if your company's doing that kind of advertising, your clients are doing that kind of advertising, be aware that you may be creating some nexus obligations where there were none prior. Vermont did this interesting thing. I'm rushing just a bit, guys, because we got a late start. But interesting enough, Vermont says, we're going to we're going to create click-through nexus regulation in our state, and we're going to enforce that as soon as the Attorney General certifies that 13 other states have done the same thing, and then we'll be the 14th. So you can see that, the states they're eager. Some of them are not as eager as others. So it's very interesting rulemaking, to be honest with you. That's why I threw it in there. It's fascinating to me, but that's the regulation in Vermont right now. So technically speaking, click-through nexus is on the books in Vermont, but will not be enforced until the Attorney General in Vermont certifies that 13 other states have click-through nexus, which I think has been hit now. So chances are Vermont's going to be added into that mix as well. Here's something interesting as well. In Alabama's created, this is related, guys, to Nexus again. I promise this whole story won't be about Nexus, but this is where a lot of action is, and you got to know what's going on. If for no other reason than so that at the Christmas party with the boss, you'll have something to talk about when it comes to sales tax as a general principle, right? This is cocktail party material for a lot of you, but it's interesting. It's probably a sign of the future. Alabama has created a portal for currently non-registered sellers who lack an obligation to collect, but who want to collect voluntarily. Now, I don't know how many people that actually fit into that category there are, but there might be a few. Some businesses prefer to collect based on the requests of their customers, right? Many customers, depending on the situation, the business they're in, they don't want a use tax obligation of their own. They prefer their vendors to collect the sales tax on their behalf, right, on the invoices. So a lot of times this is where it comes up. Whatever context it comes up, Alabama has created this simplified sales tax filing portal. The advantages, it's a flat rate. If you don't have Nexus in Alabama, you choose to collect voluntarily, Alabama's willing to forego the calculation of all the specific local rates and apply a flat rate. It's a little tricky. So to see how this might work, it's brand new from a compliance point of view from the state side. I'm talking here, guys. What Alabama's intending to do is redistribute that money to locals based on sales information that they receive. Big picture, here's what I want you guys to know. This is a response to potential federal rules. This is Alabama jumping the gun. This is the sort of thing that all the states are going to have to do in one form or another in order to take advantage of a Marketplace Fairness Act type of proposed of law that may or may not become law, right? It may not become law of the land. In order to benefit from Marketplace Fairness, the states, and by benefit I mean in order for the states to be able to enforce collection by out-of-state vendors who lack physical presence, Marketplace Fairness requires that the states make things easier for those vendors, simplify things for folks that are from out of state. I think this is their first crack at it, and Alabama, quite honestly, considering they started from scratch, has done something pretty interesting here. So check it out. If you're a real sales tax geek, you might even click on it. You can even go look and see. I talked to Alabama about it, and they're very proud of it. And I have no idea how many people are participating. This got kicked off on October 1st. I was going to say November, but October 1st. And look for this to happen more and more. So the states are looking at, and part of the impetus, again, are these federal proposals. But I think it's sound policy for the states, if they want to encourage collection by businesses who don't have physical presence within their state. It seems like it makes sense, and I agree we're talking about state bureaucracy here. It doesn't always make sense, but it seems to make sense to create a simplified way for those vendors to remit, right? And this is Alabama's crack at it, and it looks pretty good, to be honest with you. Also, for the real tax geeks out there, no, Alabama's proposing economic nexus rules for sales tax nexus. Now, this is going a little deep, but let me just quickly tell you, economic nexus refers to activities around simple financial transactions, like sales formulas, allocation formulas. It all sounds a lot like income tax, doesn't it? And for those of you who've done multi-state income tax compliance, that's exactly how you determine your obligation to remit income tax in states where you're doing business but lack physical presence. There is no physical presence test in income tax, right? It's an economic nexus test. It's how much business are you doing in our state, which to a lot of people makes a lot more sense than a physical presence test. But I'm not here to discuss the politics of it. But Alabama has gone ahead and proposed these regulations. Now, this flies in the face of Supreme Court jurisprudence in this area. The U.S. Supreme Court has said economic nexus is not the right analysis for sales tax. However, Alabama's pushing the envelope a little bit. So this is another area to keep your eye on. This is a way for the states to push the envelope to see if they can maybe get a little action out of the Supreme Court, maybe get the case in court that might change the game a little bit. So it's really something just to keep your eyes on, guys. But again, like I mentioned earlier, with that New York and click-through nexus and the success they had, if Alabama finds success with this, meaning Alabama courts bless it, even in the face of Supreme Court context, it won't be long before the other states start doing the same thing. Economic nexus, guys, this is the takeaway, would really change the way we think about where and why we are required to collect. It has to do really with volume of sales, basically. We can also talk about a lot of other types of activities, but that's the one that we're usually talking about when we talk about economic nexus. It may be far off in the future. It's not a January 1st change, right? We're going to need a huge shift and a very aggressive shift in at least one state's approach to, widening that net. We've got some state-by-state survey stuff here. I see some great questions, and we'll save some time for them, because all this stuff I'm going to talk about, except for maybe this one slide right here, everything else on here is included in the materials that Morgan's added to this deck. And in fact, there's even more detailed materials state by state by state. So we're not going to spend a ton of time on these details here, guys. It'll put you to sleep. And the problem that I have when I'm on the listening end of these sorts of presentations is a litany of a state-by-state changes is wonderful for someone who operates in every state. And chances are most of you don't. If you did, you probably wouldn't be on this. You'd have to be aware of the changes already because you're already registered and complying. So anyways, that's my caveat. This slide, though, you see how blank it is. It's blank for a reason. Arizona has proposed TPT, which is transaction privilege tax in Arizona, a.k.a. sales tax. It's a gross receipts type model, but it's for all intents and purposes. It's a sales tax. It is their sales tax. Arizona has proposed, starting January 2015, to simplify things when it comes to Arizona's home rule cities. There are 4 states out there, guys, that allow local cities, local jurisdictions, counties, special taxing jurisdictions, you name it, that allow these local government entities not to just set their own rates, like many states do, but also to monitor and maintain their own sales tax compliance regime. And Arizona is one of them. Colorado, Louisiana, and Alabama are the others. So that means in Arizona, 13 or 14 cities in Arizona, all the big ones, they run their own sales tax department. So if you make a sale in Phoenix, and you've got Nexus in Phoenix, you're collecting there, you file an Arizona state return, but you also file a City of Phoenix return. You don't put your Phoenix tax on the Arizona state return. It's 2 separate administering agencies. Now, for those of you who are dealing already in these home rule states, you're nodding your head and saying, yeah, we know all about that, Shane. For those of you that aren't, yeah, this is how it works in some states. And you can only imagine the complexities when the City of Phoenix says a widget is exempt, but the state of Arizona says the same exact widget is taxable. You can see the complexity when the forms use different nomenclature, different categories of tangible property or of services. Because the cities are allowed to create their own regimes, there can be a lot of disparity. So in order to kind of fix some of that up, at least help out on the filing and remitting side, the state of Arizona a couple years ago, 2013 or so, proposed that they would allow these home rule states to use the Arizona Department of Revenue at least as a filing hub. So at the very least, constitutionally, Arizona would not be removing the power of these cities to levy their own tax, but administratively, the state would begin collecting it. And you would think, yes, this is going in the right direction, right? Single form, eliminating the accounting that goes on between one form and the other when categories are different, right? Eliminating that the possibility of mistakes, right? Anytime, two forms, you have twice the potential for mistakes as one. They put it off January 1st, 2015, and they waited all 2016, and they told us it was coming, and it sounded good, not according to the cities, but according to the state, it sounded really good. We were in touch with the cities all year. We kind of figured this was going to happen, and what am I going to tell you? Exactly what the slide says. It is not going to take place January 1st, 2016. So you can still find on a Google search all sorts of information about changes in Arizona for filing in January 1st, 2016 that has all been put off, guys. As of January 1st, 2016, in Arizona, home rule city filing and remitting, nothing changes. But that's important, even though you're here to hear about the changes. And it's important because it really, for about 11 and a half months, 11 months, we were told it was going to happen, and Arizona has decided, mostly because the cities are not comfortable with the work that the state has done up till now, that they will not be participating. One thing that did change in Arizona, though, I will mention, guys, City of Sedona is now a program city. So that means the City of Sedona is now administered by the state of Arizona completely. It's not the same as the simplification stuff. City of Sedona simply said, if you excuse the phrase, to hell with it. We've tried to run our own sales tax for the last 10 years or so, and we realize it's a big pain, and we're just turning it all back over to the state. So that is a change as of January 1st. City of Sedona will be administered by the state of Arizona, and you'll report those sales on the Arizona return, just like you do for most of the state geographically, not the big cities. They're still home rule. Okay. So big changes in Arizona, but mostly big changes because nothing changed. Just some things going on, guys. Colorado, for those of you, this is not necessarily just sales tax folks. Colorado's done mailing paper returns. And I know a lot of small businesses, not unlike myself, help my wife operate her small business here. That's sometimes I have to admit, even for myself, I kind of wait to get the forms in the mail to remind me that I've got some work to do. The mechanic always drives the car with the bald tires. Well, the tax lawyer's wife's business, probably compliance can be shaky at times. That's about all I'll say. But anyways, I'm joking a little bit. Colorado, no more paper returns. Don't wait for them. They're not coming. You can still get them, but no more automatic mailing, and that is not limited to sales and use. So, be aware if you're operating in Colorado, or even if you just live there and you're looking for your income tax return or something, you're not going to get them this year. In Iowa, this is the list part, but it's just kind of interesting stuff, and I'll try to make it in some context of the whole country here as I zip through these. Iowa's decided that computers, and computer hardware and software, some software, is now includable under the manufacturer's exemption. Now, nearly all, I think every state, at least to some degree, who has a sales tax, has some sort of manufacturing equipment exemption, right? It's good policy. The states want to encourage manufacturing and industry within their borders, and one way they do that is they allow purchasers of equipment to use these facilities to avoid paying sales tax. Holy ho, humdrum, right? Everybody kind of knows that. But here's what's interesting. Iowa has expanded the type of equipment because I think when all of us, at least all of us born before 1980 or so, hear the word manufacturing, we think of things that make things, right? Assembly lines and pressers and sewers and packages. But really, manufacturing has really changed a lot in the last couple decades, and computers and software and robotics are really owning the day. So Iowa has made the determination that when a manufacturer or an industrial facility makes purchases of computer hardware or software to be used in the manufacturing process, that equipment and that software is exempt based on the manufacturing exemption. Now, for some of you, this is not important at all, but for those of you that are in the business of software and have customers that are potentially exempted under these rules, this may be a huge advantage for you. A competitive advantage in terms of getting in there first, being aware of it, finding out does your software meet the criteria? Does your customer meet the criteria? And maybe you can save some money. And you as a seller can accept an exemption certificate that says industrial equipment on it, and what you sell is code. So things are changing. Iowa's not the only state. I mentioned this. This is January 1st change. It's important. But it's also important to note that the states are catching up, finally, with technology and with modern manufacturing industry. And pay attention to this. If you guys, it doesn't have to be just Iowa. If you're selling computer hardware and software to somebody who's doing manufacturing or has industrial facilities in any state, investigate. Find out whether or not the items you're selling might be eligible for an exemption. In Maine, huge changes, like revolutionary changes to how they define food and whether or not food is taxable. Anyone who's involved in the food business, really shifted gears on you here, guys. Anybody who sells food or buys food knows that the vagaries of food sales tax are endless. It's full employment for people like me. The states love to carve around these things. What is a soft drink? What isn't? Public policy issues get in the middle of it. Childhood obesity, favored local industries. It's a mess. And so you end up with all kinds of rules about food, what's taxable, what isn't. The restaurant versus grocery store, deli counter versus coffee shop, bakery, all sorts of Byzantine rules. Maine has gone in and really altered their definition of taxable or exempt. In a nutshell, what they've done is they said they've added a whole slew of category of foods that were previously exempted under Maine's broad food exemption are no longer. And I know a lot of you in this call probably not selling food in Maine. The point being, though, is that, guys, if you're involved with food, if you're involved with a restaurant, prepared food business, delivery is getting to be a big thing here in Seattle. You can get just about anything delivered to your house now, including booze or pot. You got to be aware of this stuff. The states are constantly shifting the sands under your feet over what is and what isn't taxable. Does it come with a fork? Does it come with a napkin? Be aware of it. And definitely, if you're working with me at all, be super aware of it. Big time changes up there. In New York, this is just an interesting development, if you will, but I think it's something we should all be aware of. New York is floating some regulations, at least proposed regulations, to start going after online auctions. These are the eBays and the Etsy's of the world. And the unique thing here is, guys, and I know you guys don't have those type folks on this call, but it's interesting that New York is now applying rules that have applied for years in New York to auctioneers and estate liquidators and bankruptcy auctioneers. They've always been obligated to collect sales tax in New York, and it's been good law for years and years and years. Well, New York has proposed that they're going to apply those rules to online auctions as well. So if someone buys something from eBay, a customer in New York, the person selling it may be just Joe Schmo or Joanne Schmo in Tempe, Arizona, right? She's got her craft up on eBay. It's not Joanne Schmo that's going to be obligated to collect under these rules, guys. It's going to be eBay. So this is really revolutionary because those sales have never been taxed by anybody. Everyone's always really considered eBay to be just an interloper. It's not just eBay, guys, any online auction house. To be just kind of an intermediary, which I think business-wise, that's exactly what they are. But for sales tax purposes, New York is proposing that, no, they aren't an intermediary, but they provide a marketplace. They collect the purchase price. They ship the item. They describe the item, right? So all these services that go along with New York saying, no, you're more than just a financial interloper here. You got a real part in the sale. It'll be fascinating to see how this goes out. This is not a January 1st change, guys. This is something to keep your eyes on. Does it affect your business directly? Maybe not, but as the states work to do more and more of this ingenious lawmaking to collect more taxes, it's important to be aware of it. And it's awesome cocktail party stuff. It is. People really dig that sort of stuff. Hey, first time I've ever mentioned Oregon in a sales tax update webinar. They don't have a sales tax, right, guys? And for all you newbies out there are 5 of them that don't, right? Oregon and Alaska, Montana, Delaware, New Hampshire, no state sales taxes. Alaska allows locals to collect up there, but there are no state sales taxes in Alaska, Oregon, Montana, New Hampshire, and Delaware. Oregon, though, does have a sales tax now, first one ever, and it doesn't begin on the 1st, it begins on the 4th, and Oregon's very first sales tax in the history of the state will be on recreational marijuana, which was made legal there during the summer. So mostly here to lighten the mood a little bit, but also appreciate this is going to allow Oregon to get a little taste of running a sales tax regime. So it'll be interesting to see what happens down in Salem, where the raging debate over income tax versus sales tax it comes up every 2 years, every 2-year budget cycle. I lived in Oregon for a while, by the way, and their income tax rates are incredibly high. Even people that are fairly poor pay income tax in Oregon. There is no sales tax, so it's fascinating. It's the complete opposite of Washington, where I am, where there is no personal income tax, but I pay roughly 10% sales tax on just about everything I buy. Hey, Puerto Rico. Again, leading energy aren't making sales in Puerto Rico. If you're watching what's going on in Puerto Rico, they've got serious financial problems. They floated a bunch of bonds half a decade ago. They have no hope of paying them back. Rates being what they are, it's not surprising. But Puerto Rico's in some serious dire straits. Well, here's the interesting part. They instituted a VAT-style tax to go on top of their sales tax. So it'll be interesting to see how that works and if other states follow suit. We all the time today really get deeply into a VAT tax, guys. But it's a European style. It's a value-added tax. It's a tax that's assessed at every level of consumption, borne finally by the consumer, but a much more a pyramid type of approach as opposed to a one-and-done approach like a sales tax. In Washington, as of January 1st, expanded sales tax to all sorts of activities conducted by athletic facilities. So Washington didn't come out and say teaching martial arts is taxable. They said teaching martial arts by, and I'm using air quotes that you can't see right now, guys, because it's a defined term, by athletic facilities is taxable. So in Washington, if you're running an athletic facility, Gold's Gym or whatever, all of a sudden all these little aerobics, maybe not little, all these aerobics courses and martial arts and stretching and yoga and whatever the latest craze is, they're not taxable in Washington. It's important if you're in Washington selling these things. It's also important to realize, guys, that this is the trend. The states are looking more and more at services as a source of revenue. So, keep your eyes open. If your company or your clients are in the business of selling services, you kind of can't just rely on the old axiom that, stuff is taxable for sales tax purposes and services aren't. That's really changing fast. Depending on the state, it's almost eliminated in some places, right? Hey, Wisconsin hired 111 new sales tax auditors in 2016. Woo-hoo! I apologize, you guys. And then at the end, I'm going to take some questions. Hey, what happens January 1st? So guys, just like the start of every quarter, and really the start of every month, but particularly the start of every quarter, lots of rate changes, lots of annexations. Can't believe there are dozens there. Honestly, I think it's more like hundreds. I personally looked at the Washington annexations for this quarter. It's 17 or 18 annexations. And you're saying, Shane, what is that? What are you talking about? It's governments altering their borders. So as these governments charge different tax rates based on where you stick the pin in the map, when that map shifts based on annexations or changes to borders, your compliance has to keep up with it. And this is January 1st this is where we see a lot of these, because they're usually tied to zoning, they're tied to purchases made by the city, and January 1st is a really common time for them to take effect, usually for property tax purposes. But sure enough, many of them affect sales tax compliance, so keep your eyes open for them. And that is it, and I know I blew through that, but we missed the first 10 minutes or so. And Morgan, do you want to help me out with a couple questions while I take a quick drink?
Absolutely, Shane. Thanks so much for your presentation today. So we have a lot of great questions that came in. So I'm going to go ahead and run them by you, and we've got some interesting ones here. You know, first one I just wanted to throw out there, somebody asked, is are there any helpful tips for sales tax, specifically relating to software as a service companies? Anything that they should know, or any important changes coming in the future? We get a lot of questions asked about that. It seems like it's one of the more complex industries with regard to sales tax. So is there anything new that you know of? And if not, you know, it might be kind of interesting just to touch on a couple of things that do make software as a service particularly tricky.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I'm not aware of anything for January 1st that is earth-shattering when it comes to SaaS, software as a service. But here's a sketch of what's going on. Over the course of time, the states, of course, are slow to catch up with technological change, right, guys? And that's, in a way, that's the way government is designed to work, right? It's meant to be deliberative. It's meant to be kind of slow, and that's for good reason, for many policy reasons. But it means that as technology, particularly at the pace of software delivery has changed in the last decade, the states are really just catching on. Real quickly, what happened as the states discovered that people were no longer getting their software delivered to them? And I don't just mean by physical media, guys, you know, like a CD or tapes, but electronic delivery as well. In other words, folks no longer get software and install it on their hard drive anymore. And probably to this crowd today, this is not a revolutionary idea to you. You know this already. But to a bunch of lawmakers in Salem or Olympia or Albany or wherever, yeah, this takes a little while to sink in. What the regulators did, kind of in the meantime, is they kind of broke into three camps. One camp said, no transfer of anything, no tax. Because, by the way, virtually everybody taxes software, guys, canned software. We're not talking custom, just canned software. Virtually everybody taxes it if you get it on a disk or if you get it electronically delivered. Almost everybody. The question is, do they tax it when you're accessing the software over the Internet, but the software never actually resides on your hard drive? That's SaaS, right? The states broke into these two categories. Like I said, one category said, hey, nothing's transferred, no PPP, this is not a sale, no tax. A few other states said, well, this isn't software at all. This is actually like a data processing or an information service. Texas is a great example of that. The third category of states took the lazy way, if you will, or probably the only thing the regulators could do, absent new laws, and they said, hey, we don't care that nothing's changing place. Software is software. We're going to treat it just like software. And those are the states you got to be careful of, because it doesn't always make a lot of sense when you're reading their bare bones regulations and publications about software, whether or not it applies to SaaS. You really got to dig deep. Now, all of that said, there's the background. All of that said, the states are catching up. And we are finding more and more states are giving us specific answers on SaaS. For example, just in the last few months, well, maybe 6 months, Idaho came out and said SaaS is not TPP. It's not tangible personal property. It's not taxable. So, I mean, sometimes when we get an answer, the answer is it's exempt. We just want an answer, right, guys? So it is happening slowly but surely. We're even seeing a few of the states start to publish some guidance on infrastructure as a service and platform as a service as well. New Jersey did a few years back, and a few states have followed suit. The answers are not uniform, but at least we are starting to see some publication in that area. Suffice to say, though, when it gets down to what happens on the ground, guys, no more theoretical law professor here. This is what happens. You got to look closely at your agreements. You got to look carefully at your contracts for this stuff. There's cases out there where SaaS is sold. The people selling the SaaS probably, they're busy too, kind of slap together pieces and parts of a contract that they already had been using for 10 or 15 years for selling their software on a disk. And that contract says things like you can't export the software. I mean, you guys are in the software game, you know some of these clauses, right? You can't export it, you can't copy it, you can't do this, you can't do that. Well, in reading those clauses in the agreement for SaaS, there are courts that have said, we don't care that it's SaaS. This contract says you can't export it. Well, if you could export it, it must be tangible personal property, and therefore we don't care that it lacks a tangible medium, right? It's not delivered on a disk. Because your contract includes this language that indicates that this software could be transferred, that's all you need to know. My point being is that there's 2 points. One of them is that's a pretty darn important thing to get the hell out of your SaaS contract. But number 2, the important thing is look closely. Does your agreement say it's a license? Or does your agreement say it's a subscription? A license implies that there's a transfer of rights to the software. A subscription implies that it's a service. We'll get to the next question, and I'll stay on, you guys, if you guys want to listen. I know we started late. I'm happy to continue to answer a few questions. I was talking to somebody a year ago, and we had this very same conversation, and it was a great conversation with a tax department of a very big company. And they sold a ton of software. And we had this conversation, and I got to this license or subscription question, and we're all on the conference call. It's all very tax pros, very, very friendly. And so, what does your agreement say? He said, let me pull up one. He did. You know what it says at the top of the agreement? License/subscription agreement. So even the big boys are still figuring out that they need to be real careful about how they describe these products, because when the rubber hits the road, sometimes that's more important than the actual content of what's delivered. So I hope that's helpful for those of you that are looking for some info on SaaS.
All right, thanks, Shane. Hey, another question. Does click-through nexus, does that apply to use tax in the states that have passed it as well?
Well, that's a good question. I'm not sure in the context of how it would. The nexus. Well, actually, let me give you my law professor answer, because that's all I can come up with off the cuff. Yes, it would, because the click-through nexus is establishing nexus, and once you've got nexus, you have an obligation. Now, I have to think hard about how this might come up in reality, but yeah, a business could be making purchases. Although it strains a little bit, because without having some presence within a state, I don't know how many purchases you could make that would be subject to a use tax, right? The use tax applies to things that are used within a state. But yes, theoretically, it certainly would. The click-through nexus idea is once you have established that connection via that advertisement, the nexus bell has been rung for sales and use tax purposes. So it's a good question. I'll think about that, and maybe I can add that in next time I'm talking about this stuff. It's interesting.
All right. Next question. This is a little more auditor or audit related with regard to resale exemption certificates. But the person writes in general, if a resale certificate is presented a year after the transaction, so, I buy something from you, Shane, you exempt tax, but I don't then supply you with the exemption certificate until a year after the fact. If the state doesn't actually call out in their guidelines when the seller should have received the certificate, will auditors accept this? Is this, a generally okay? Or is it, no, it had to have been exactly at the time of purchase and you need to show proof of that? This person says that many states provide a 120 window. So I assume a year goes well past that. But in your experience, do you have any guidance on that?
I don't have any specific guidance. I would say I think the questioner is right. I think there are some states that provide for a grace period, if you will. I'll tell you though, you're talking to a son of a career sales tax auditor from the state of New York. And that's what my father did. And I understand a little bit about how their minds work, and that's tricky business. To me, just on a practical level, I would be very concerned if I don't have a resale certificate in my hand when I issue that invoice free of tax. Yes, I think there may be a state safe harbor, which if you follow it in, then you probably got a pretty good argument that you got a great argument that you're in the clear. But boy, especially in states where there's a vacuum, I would, only in a worst case scenario would that happen. Now I know as tax pros, you guys are the last people that are getting asked these questions, meaning, the sale has been made, the sale has been booked, the stuff is on pallets waiting to get on a truck. You're probably not in a position to march into the VP of sales' office and say, no, don't make that sale. I appreciate that. But that said, to me, that's fairly risky on a practical level. If you're in the safe harbor, if you can back up what you've done, sure, you probably got a pretty good shot of avoiding a nasty assessment. But I would bet that the majority of auditors out there are going to look very closely at any time that a resale certificate is not in your hand when that invoice is made. And to me, that's it's not the end of the world, kind of risky, but I would really insist. Because here's the question, and again, I know that this stuff is the last thing that the salespeople and the business development think about. But if they can get you one in 120 days, well, why can't they just get you one today? It's really just a matter of shooting you a copy. So I'd really be a stickler for that, to be honest with you. I don't have any personal experience, guys. That's just my gut feeling on it. I'd be real cautious about making those sales without having a cert in your hand. And while we're on certs, let me mention, take a look at the cert you got in that dusty old file. Make sure what you got is still valid. Meaning, a few states, resale certs go stale. Florida, for example, you got to get a fresh one every couple of years. You want to make sure the address is on there right. The businesses haven't changed hands. Is it signed by someone that even still owns the company anymore? Does it have a specific exemption purpose listed on a resale cert, but is kind of morphed into a blanket certificate? These are things you got to be careful of for the ones you're already using. I know that wasn't the question, Morgan, but it's something that's really important when it comes to exemption certificate management is maintenance. Is that 6-year-old certificate that was sent to you by the company that has now moved twice, merged, gone bankrupt, recreated, moved to another state, sold, is it still valid even though on its face it's fully complete? You may find, in fact, I guarantee if you're making a lot of exempt sales, that you've got at least one or two of these things in your closet, and those are just gold for auditors, right, guys? So it's a good topic. Good question.
Hey, one last point on exemption certificates, because a number of questions have come through on that. Do you typically find that that there exist certificates that pertain only to certain jurisdictions or cities? This person writes in, that they have different resale registrations for Tennessee, but they're specific to Memphis and Nashville. But does Tennessee recognize these resale registrations to exempt tax at the state level as well? I was under the impression that exemption certificates were always at the state level, but perhaps not.
No, actually, Morgan, there are, especially in those home rule states, like I mentioned, absolutely not, right? Because those regimes in those four states are entirely separate. Now, in a state like Tennessee, the answer is no, right? The state is not going to recognize a city resale certificate. I'm not certain what that certificate's for in Tennessee specifically, other than maybe for specific items or objects based on city rules or something. But as a general principle, no. Those city-only exemption certificates or jurisdiction-only will not apply up the ladder. You need a state certificate in order to exempt the state tax. Except for particular fact patterns, I think that's the only policy I would abide by. Also, recognize that, again, kind of related to this since we have some questions on it, there's a lot of different flavors of exemption certificates now, right, guys? There's the resellers, which is probably the most common, but like we mentioned in Iowa, that manufacturer's exemption, there's more and more granularity when it comes to these different types of certs. California's got a dozen different types of exemption certificates for sales tax, at least. So it's really important, too, to not only look at the jurisdictions, it's a great question, but also look at the nature of the exemption certificate you got in your hand. Does it actually apply to the sales that are being made, or is it something that kind of morphed into a blanket certificate but was never really intended to be? But I think as a general principle, Morgan, no. The answer is no. Having a resale exemption certificate at a local level does not give you audit proof to exempt at the state level. I'd be very cautious of that. I would not rely on that whatsoever.
All right. Well, thanks for clarifying that. A few of the other questions that are coming in are very state specific. So, you just lucky that you have the information maybe in your bevy, or maybe it would take more research. But I thought I'd throw a couple of them out. But one is, has Alabama stated a threshold for the economic nexus?
Oh, that's a good question. It might be in there. I have not looked closely at the economic threat nexus regulations. I picked it up off of a research portal. That's a good question. I'm sure they are, because I don't know how else to frame economic nexus except through a formulaic approach, right? Meaning, if you sell this much, you're in, kind of thing. Now, listen, those are just proposals too. It remains to be seen whether or not that sort of thing will even fly. The U.S. Supreme Court has basically outlawed the application of economic nexus to sales tax. So Alabama really is bucking sales tax jurisprudence, if you will. That said, I don't bring it up because I think they're crazy. I bring it up because everybody's interested in fixing sales tax right now. And that includes the U.S. Supreme Court. So it's possible that the Supreme Court could allow that. All that being said, no, it's a good question. But they're out there. If you poke around, you can find them, or I'll look. Next time I talk on this, I'll mention it. That's a good question.
Okay, thanks for that. One person wrote in, any update on examples of what type of items qualify for the Georgia consumable sales tax exemption for manufacturers that went into place on July 1st, which was the fiscal new year. And the person says that the Georgia Department of Resources has not provided a lot of guidance on this new law, which is unfortunate. So I think kind of two-part is one, Shane, whether or not you happen to know. But if not, perhaps we can even extend this out a little bit and provide some guidance to everybody on who, is looking for very specific information, maybe relating to their industry or to their specific jurisdiction. What would you recommend as far as finding out some of those very detailed, sales tax compliance information?
As far as the Georgia goes, I have not seen anything either. There's a very diplomatic way of expressing Georgia's reticence to give us many details in this area. Yeah, and I recall that rule when it came out was phrased very odd, if I recall, and so it wasn't clear what it was going to apply to. I'm actually looking right now. Yeah, I don't think there's anything new as far as specific guidance to tell us exactly what is or what is not consumable supplies. I think what they did is they shifted some things from what used to be equipment into supplies or something, if I recall. It was kind of odd rulemaking even at the time. I apologize. I don't think there's been anything published. It's a good question. More to your point, like how do I find this stuff out? It's not a uniform manner in which to go about this. Many of the states do provide a listserv, for those you can still remember those, or an email web list. You can get on and get like automatic newsletters or updates or news. That's a source of a lot of good info. It doesn't mean you're going to get your answers there, but hopefully it'll be the kind of things that today hopefully does for you, which is point you in the right direction, or at least perk your ears up that something might be going on. Honestly, you're here today, guys, for some sales tax talk, and I'm not here to pitch the company. I think we do a great job. But the Auditor blog is awesome for this stuff. We have a couple of writers over there that really just scour around from state to state looking for things that are going on. You can pop on there anytime. You won't find a lot of pitches for the product, but we'll find a lot of good info there. Honestly, I think it's one of the best ones out there, except for paying for a research portal like I have the advantage of because I'm in the tax research business. So you can always get an RIA checkpoint or CCH, but I mean, it's pretty damn expensive. But other than that, going to the DOR sites, Google searches are as good as the sources you find, but I will mention that a lot of SALT practices and, meaning state and local tax, accounting, and law practices have some decent blogs out there, and you can find some good leads. Sometimes these folks are looking at things more specifically and more granularly because of a particular case they have or a particular controversy that they're dealing with, and sometimes it's exactly what you're looking for. So, it can be time-consuming, but I would say with a major grain of salt, you can also poke around and find some good industry information as well from folks that are professionals in the field. But I tell you, the Auditor blog is pretty good. Gail Cole is our blogger, and she does a really good job of putting out short, readable, understandable blog posts with lots of links, state by state, on just things that are going on. And she does a good job of it. Aside from the DOR sites themselves and getting on the newsletters and getting on the email list, which is what I do, it can be difficult. I know. A lot of the states are not great at getting the word out. I feel your pain.
Oh, thanks, Shane. I went ahead and put our a link to our blog right up there on the little message screen to the left, so you can go ahead and take a look there. And I would certainly add to Shane's recommendation. Gail Cole does an excellent job with a lot of interesting, up-to-date sales tax info. So, Shane, one more question here, just one more, and I really appreciate you staying on longer here. Back on exemption certificates, that seems to be kind of the flavor today. Will state exemption certificates apply to home rule jurisdictions?
No. That was the easiest question all day. No. I can't think of any, unless a specific home rule jurisdiction has adopted a specific rule to allow that. As a general principle, no. And to me, it's something that's kind of risky, anyways. If a company is operating, your purchaser is operating within one of those jurisdictions, they should be able to produce a resale cert for you, because you're the one that's going to be on the hook. The risk is going to be on the seller in almost all the states. In fact, in all the states, for practical purposes, and in about half the states, the seller's really on the hook. The states presume that you are aware that you're avoiding taxes, right? It's up to the seller to prove that their customer is legit. It puts you in a really tough position. It's all about burden of proof and stuff, guys. So resale certs are tricky business, and as the count gets better, guys, meaning, in the old days, like in my father's days, the auditors would come in and they'd look at your books. I mean, they'd really look at your accounting. They'd look at those big green spreadsheets. They'd look at the math, right? Well, there's no more problems with the math anymore, right? So auditors have had to become more creative, if you will, and when they're looking for assessments. In one area that auditors have really expanded their, at least in my anecdotal experience, well, they've really expanded their view is in resale certificates, because, like I was mentioning earlier, anybody who's got a few hundred of those things and is making sales based on them, I guarantee you've got a couple in there that are not up to snuff, and auditors are always looking at them. So I think as a general principle, it's not the area to be cutting corners when it comes to risk, and I would say that'd be pretty risky to apply a state exemption certificate to a home rule city without specific regulation giving you the power to do so. Good question, though. That's what. All right,
thank you so much, Shane.
You're welcome. That's what your customers are going to tell you. Your customers are going to tell you that's fine because they don't want to pay tax. But you're going to be the one that's on the hook if the tax should have been collected. So, anyways, Morgan, you're welcome. Thank you all for hanging on. Gosh, a bunch of you hung on. Hope you got some useful info out of it. You see my email there, and Morgan, if you have any questions about today's prezo, please forward it. And thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.